Hi everyone, welcome to episode 2 on the Help Build podcast series. If you tuned into the first episode, you would have seen a bit more about Help Build and what we're about. In this episode, we've called it I Want to Build, Where Do I Start? And that is exactly what we're going to do. You've now got a project in mind, whether it will be an extension at home, a renovation, you found a property you want to buy but it needs work, you found a plot of land and you want to build a house on that. This is exactly the episode for you on how to get started. We're going to be covering what you need to do first. Do you need planning? Do you need an architect? We're going to briefly touch on how much it's going to cost, who else are you going to need to help you, and top tips for getting started. So this episode is all about where to go next now you want to carry out a construction project. So, what do you need to do first? 3 ways to look at this. Why, what, and how. So, why are you wanting to carry out a home project or a construction project? The why is so important. It may just be because you've watched all the TV programs, you've watched Grand Designs, you've watched the renovation, Kirsty and Phil's Love It or List It, and you really just want to do your own project. No problem at all. It might be you've got a growing family and you now need more space. The house you're in is just not working for you, but you love the area, you don't want to move, but you want to carry out a construction project. Or it just could be that you found your dream plot in your dream location and now you've decided you want to build your dream home, whether that be a new build or a renovation. But what's really important to make sure the next steps are carried out correctly. And then you go on to how. How are you going to create this dream home of yours? How are you going to make sure that if it's space you're after, you get the best space for your money? How are you going to make sure it looks right? How are you going to make sure that you're going to meet all the regulations? It's not going to cost you over what it should. So the how is, are you going to employ a turnkey contractor who's going to control the whole project? Are you handy? Are you actually in a trade yourself? Are you a carpenter? Are you an electrician so you can do elements? You've got some construction background. I managed my own home project 2 years ago. It was an eye-opener. It taught me more. I got my hands dirty, believe it or not. I'm not just a keyboard and a pen pusher, as site guys like to call me. I got the trades in what I couldn't do, and yeah, it was still stressful. I live in, breathe construction, but it was still a stressful project, especially as I was working in the day, I was carrying out project management and the construction on evenings and weekends. Now that might be a way to do it. You will save money on doing it that way. However, you've got to have some experience in construction. I would never recommend, if you are completely green to construction and building, do not take a project on without some help. It is a stressful process, especially if you're living in the home where you carry out a construction project. And that is why the what and the how is so important to get right. So once you've decided on those 3, then you can move on to the next stages. So one of the main questions when you're thinking of a construction project is planning. Planning's a minefield, as I said in the first episode. When you're looking at planning, bring in the experts, bring in an architect, bring in a planner, bring in somebody who is going to help you. To be fair, your local council's planning department will help you to an extent. They'll give you some guidance, and a lot of your local planning council websites will have specific planning detail for your area. Get the experts on board. If you're carrying out a home project, I'll give you a very, very quick brief. Permitted development, I did my own extension on the permitted development. It's great. People think you don't need planning. Permitted development is still a type of planning, but you don't have to go through the full planning process. It will basically mean that you can carry out the project under permitted development. As a general rule of thumb, this is a rear extension, potentially a side extension depending on the boundaries. There's a lot to it. 3 to 4 meters out in depth, and the width no more than the width of your house. The main thing with permitted development is it has to match the material and the style of your existing property. So if you've got a pitched roof with roof tiles and brick, you can only build the extension under permitted development with the matching roof tiles and the matching brick, matching windows. You cannot then go and render, have a flat roof. Permitted development has to match the style of the existing property. You can have two-storey extensions under permitted development. It does get a little bit more complicated. One thing I would advise if you do permitted development is still send your drawings to the council. They charge a fee of around 50 to £75 from memory. And then what you get, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks, and what you get is a letter back to you saying that you carried out the project, or you're going to carry out the project under permitted development laws. The reason I say this is two things. If you ever sell a property and the permitted development laws change, you may struggle to prove that your property was built under permitted development because there's no record of it. And it will also go on a planning portal. So obviously anytime a construction project happens, it can create a little bit of disturbance in the area. Neighbours can get a little bit unhappy with the noise. If you don't get this letter and approval from the council, it won't go on a planning portal, which means nobody can see it. So they could be knocking on your door and causing a bit of a stink. You're doing everything that you should. However, get that letter. It just makes life a lot easier for a very small fee. If you can't do your project under permitted development, then it is through planning. If you're in a listed area, if you're in a conservation area, you 100% can't do permitted development. If you're doing anything with flats, you can't do that under permitted development. What I would advise at this stage is get an architect involved. Your architect or your planner will help you make sure you follow the rules at the start, because there's always conditions on planning, whether it's a tree preservation, which classes a TPO, whether there's certain things you have to do prior to commencement, whether that will be material approval. All these things come in, and if you don't know about it, you can land yourself in a lot of hot water. There's been a lot of projects in the press at the minute where they're being made to take their builder down because they haven't followed planning. Get the planners on side, do everything you're meant to, and employ somebody who can help you, which could be your architect. So, architects, do you need one? 95% of the time, yes you will if you're talking about a decent project. If you're on about just knocking a stud wall out, bit of plastering, new kitchen, reconfiguration, if you've got a decent builder, you may get away with not having an architect. But certainly, if you have got to have building regulations, which we'll come on to in a little bit, or if you have to apply for planning, you will need a drawing produced. And also, when you're tendering out works to contractors, which we're going to cover that in a completely separate episode, you need a drawing. The builder needs to know what they're building. Building with poor drawings only leads to one thing, and that is costing you money. If it is not on the drawing and it is not correct, it will cost you way more in the long run. And I can promise you that from experience, it will. Pay up front, get the architects to do your drawings. Now, you don't necessarily need to use a full architect's practice. You can use an architect's technician. You know, there's different levels of architect. If you're doing a big project, you know, I'm talking £250,000 above, get a good architect who can do your visualizations. They can support you through the planning process. They can support you through the build if you need them to. And if you struggle visualizing, you're not 100% sure what you want, there's a big design element to it. So it's not just about space, it's about creating that dream wow factor. There's different levels of architect, and I don't mean this in necessarily ability. What I mean is, if you're doing a standard rear extension, knocking the back of the house out and putting the kitchen, dining, living area in, you don't necessarily need all the CGIs and the big drawing packages. You just need, you know, a set of drawings which will explain what you're building, get you through building regs, let the builder know what they're building, and you know what you're getting. You know, that will be a much lower cost to having a full design pack with CGIs, you know, and regular meetings to get the design right. So there's different levels. Biggest advice, get an architect if you're taking on a project, especially if you're tendering out to contractors and you're looking to get different quotes, because you need fair representation of quotes. One thing I'd say with an architect, speak to people who have had projects designed and built by them. Ask them for a list of people, just like selecting a builder. Ask them for a couple of people, hopefully in the same area, who you wouldn't mind speaking to or getting some testimonials on, seeing their drawings and maybe being able to see the project now it's been built. Really important, really important. One thing and a real good job a good architect will do is ensure that you've discussed your budget and it is designed to budget. That's the biggest key, that's the biggest flaw I've seen in my history in construction, is you have something designed which is not within your budget. And if you're going down buying a property or buying land and you can't afford to build it, then you're in in no man's land then. So make sure you and your architect are on the same wavelength with budget, what's affordable, what you want. An architect will want to know why you're doing it and what you need, and give them ideas on that. The design and the finishes can all come after, but to start with, that's where the why, the what and the how need to come in. So yeah, get an architect. There's a list on the RABA website, and they will ensure that you are selecting a decent qualified architect to take on. This is going to be the burning question when you're thinking about carrying out a project. How much is my project going to cost? And I'm going to tell you right now how much it's going to cost. Haven't got a clue. Joking aside, every project is different and it differs from Scotland down to London into Cornwall. What specification, how much are you doing? The cost of a project is basically why I set up this business. This is what we do day in, day out without trying to plug a sale here. We help people budget and we help people estimate, and whether that's you're a contractor, a self-builder or a developer. If I was going to record an episode on how much it will cost exactly, we'd be here for a week. I am going to do a really good episode on how much it will cost later in this series, and it won't tell you how much your project's going to cost, but it is going to tell you how to try and come up with a budget and different ways of costing your project. Right now, 9 times out of 10, a builder's not going to give you a cost unless you've got a set of plans. If you're friends with a builder, that's a great starting point if you know one, or if there's a project, down your street, or you've seen something, or you know somebody who's done it, ask them how much their project cost. Don't be afraid to ask, they can only say no. Years and years ago, you used to be able to do a rear single extension for 15, 20k. Now that's never going to happen. I've carried out new builds which have cost £500,000. I've carried out new builds which has cost £250,000. I've carried out extensions which cost £42,000, and that was a 6x3 with a knock through, not including the kitchen. We've carried out a large, I think it was 9.5 metres by 4 metres. That's going to be north of 75k. And then from that, do you spend 10k on a kitchen, or do you spend £50,000 a kitchen? Are you having brick? Are you having render? Are you having cladding? Is it a flat roof? Are you having loads of roof lights? The cost of your project really depends on specification. Get on board with a decent architect, or if you know your contractor you're going to be using straight away, get them on board early days. Let them help you budget, but please always keep a budget at the forefront. Everyone thinks the budget is something you should keep in your back pocket and not tell anybody. That's not going to help you. Please discuss budget with your architect, discuss budgets with your contractor if you already know who you're going to be using, and come up with a realistic budget for your project. Or, without selling, contact us at Help Build and we're more than happy to see if we can help you budget. So, here's my top tips for getting started. So, you're sat at home now and you want to carry out a construction project. We've discussed the different types. These relate to all of them. My top tips. You need to have an idea of what you want. Think about the space before the finish. And the reason I say that is 80%, 90% of the time is more important at the start. Think about the space, whether it's an extension or it's a new build. Think about the space and what you need it for. Think about, is this a short-term project where you're going to be selling within a few years, or is this a long-term? A friend of mine often uses a 10-year rule. Build to the value of the house. By that I mean, don't put a £50,000 kitchen in a £200,000 house, and you'll get your money back within 10 years through natural inflation in the property. If it's a forever home and budget isn't such a thing, it's a little bit different. So think about the space before you think about the finish. When it comes to the finish, have a drive around your area. If there's an area you really like the look of houses, especially if you're doing a new build, go and have a look. Take a picture if you can. Maybe knock on the door of that person. You might have to take a picture of your house. Get a feel for what you want your home to look like when you drive up to it. That's really, really important. Use Pinterest. Pinterest is my favourite thing, especially for home projects. When I've done my daughter's bedroom, when I've done my garden, when I've done my home office, Pinterest was my friend. You can add hundreds and hundreds of pictures, start to develop a mood board. And when you go to see your architect and when you start to design your build, this will be invaluable. And for your contractors, when you start speaking to your builders, what's in your head won't be in their head necessarily. So showing them what you want it to look like or the ideas you like, really valuable. Pinterest is your friend. Visit the Home and Renovation Show, and there is other shows like the Grand Designs. Home and Renovation Show is great for ideas, it's great for feeling things like windows and doors and getting a good feel for the quality, especially if you're looking at a higher end project where the finish needs to be spot on. There's also people like renewable companies there, or the latest products. Yeah, I'd really recommend going to somewhere like that. And I'd also speak to people. Speak to people you know who carried out building projects. If it's, as I said before, if they're on your street, in your area, and you know them or you don't know them, most people are quite, happy to let you see the project, especially if it's recent. They're proud of it. I let a few people in to my home when I did mine, because I did a few different ideas, and people were like, oh, can I come and have a look? Yeah, no problem. So speak to people, get a good idea, and that will really help. They're my top tips for getting started. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I really do hope that it's give you some ideas of how to get started. That's what we do at Help Build. We're here to help people. We predominantly get started from when it's closer to construction stage, but why not use our knowledge from that point to help you guys? So in episode 3, we're going to be covering all the different people and all the different companies you're going to need to help you with your build. We've touched on architects today and planners. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a lot more. It's surprising when you take on a project how many different people you're going to need to be involved. So tune in for episode 3, and please hit the subscribe button and follow us on social media for weekly ideas, top tips, and to see what we're doing in our own projects. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.